I really appreciate everyone attending. We've got, it looks like from the attendance list, some really good representation of investigators and data managers from Shale Hills, and also from the CZOData project team. And the intent of this consult is to really have a three-way conversation between those three groups of people about data management specifically for your CZO. We're going to use this time and go through that questionnaire as an agenda. We'll start with a presentation to hear about the Shale Hills data management approach that's local. Then we'll have some Q&A time and probably do a quick review of the expected and optional approaches for sharing data as recommended by the CZOData team, and then have some Q&A around that, and then finally wrap up. Along those, in that discussion, we'll probably come up with some recommendations on how we might be able to work with you to improve or implement some of our approaches, and then near the end we can talk very briefly, or as long as we have time for, about the future aspects of the CZOData project, or things that you'd like to see in the future needs that you have that could be funded in the next round of CZOData. All right, so why don't we get started with the presentation about Shale Hills.
Okay, so these slides are kind of the current state of data management, essentially where we are right now. In our organization, three of us there on the left in the technical program management all deal with data in some way. And I serve as the data manager, cyber specialist. Brandon Forsythe, he is our Watershed sensor-based data specialist, is in charge of all the instrumentation in the field. And Jennifer is our program coordinator and also the sample or specimen-based data specialist. Our Watershed is this area in central Pennsylvania that encompasses Shavers Creek. Within Shavers Creek, we have a few field sites. Our original small Shale Hills field site right here. We've just expanded to a sandstone forested site, which we call Garner Run. That's the stream that runs through it. And we have some monitoring stations along Shavers Creek, above and below Lake Perez, and down at the outlet. Instrumentation from phase one of the CZO program was very much a measure everything everywhere within the Shale Hills catchment. This is just an overview of what has been there, and some of it is held over as we scale up to not being able to measure everything everywhere. What we're moving forward with in Shale Hills is what we call groundhog sites, which have the soil gas, soil moisture. Some have sap flow, and we still have the meteorological flux tower at the ridge top. And we also have a Katina setup at Garner Run, which has 4 sites in a transect. We have a mid-slope site on Tussey Mountain. We have a valley floor, and we have a mid-slope and ridge top on Leading Ridge. The measurement suite that we're currently working with going forward, I won't spend a ton of time on this. It's 3 slides of an exhaustive list to make sure we know what we're measuring and where. We can come back to it if anyone has any specific questions about measurements. The main part of my talk here is how data go through Shale Hills. And despite some of the complexities and some of the connections here, it's a basic top to bottom process that I'll go through based on the various source types at the top. We have externally managed sources. We have a Cosmos probe set up in Shale Hills that is directly connected to and run by the group at the University of Arizona. So it is only linked to our website and with metadata on criticalzone.org and the geoportal search.criticalzone.org. We also have a phenocam at the top of the tower that is managed by Harvard University. And we also just provide links to that. We have the rest of the data I've broken down into 3 classifications. We have transmitted data, which are data that gets sent over the internet from the field site to Shale Hills. This includes 10 eddy covariance data, some flux tower meteorology, our ridgetop rain gauge, and soon we will have some raw stream discharge and turbidity set up after we get some of the instruments back online after having to replace the weir at the Shale Hills stream. We have field team data, which essentially I classify as anything that somebody actually has to go out and plug into an instrument or data logger to download onto a laptop and bring back to campus. That includes things like water and gas samples, downloaded data from the data loggers. They upload then to an internal storage space that we have. I check it. If there's any processing necessary, it gets sent off to whichever PI or PI's group does any processing. And then it comes back to me and I input it into the local database or otherwise post it to the web. This includes a lot of hydropathological properties. Some of these we're not moving forward with in the second phase as we scaled back, but dielectric and soil moisture we are. It also includes sap flow and soil moisture and dielectric from the ground hog site. We also have people that collect data via other means out in the field just to get to me, like tree survey updates, doing litter and dendroban measurements, things like that. And then there's specimen data, which is resultant from testing all of the actual physical samples that come back from the field. And Jennifer handles cataloging, processing, and archiving those. And the various investigators, when they release their data to me, I then post it online. Jennifer also will submit a data set to EarthChem to get a DOI. And we have other data types, like we have some geophysical data, like gamma counts, seismic data, GPR, and so forth. These I collect from PIs when it's available, and they're not always of a form that I can import into our local database. Other data acquisition, we have an annual data call that we send out to notify everyone at the CZO in March to remind them if they have data that I need to start sharing, that they need to get it to me. And I send that out, or Jennifer sends it out, including a blank metadata template, and we'll follow up with reminders. So that's how we get most of the data. For processing and analysis, through the CZO website we have at czo.psu.edu, I have 3 HTML pages that we have classified in 3 broad sets: time series data, geospatial, geochemical, and geophysical. And those pages all link to various either CSV or Excel files, proprietary formatted files like GPR, or PHP scripts that request data out of the database and can let the user download it as a CSV. At the CMS or criticalzone.org, our data pages there, those are set up by the Expression Engine content management system that I maintain the pages for, and they contain a lot of the metadata for each data set with links to components, like for each year's worth of soil moisture and so forth. Or they will link, as I've been cutting them over now, to various PHP scripts to access our local database. We have currently 61 data sets linked with 269 components on criticalzone.org. So we're in line with the rest of the network.
Which one is this?
They go from left to right. Boulder, Calhoun, they're in alphabetical order.
Great, from left to right.
Left to right. Oops. from left to right, they're alphabetical, and there's 3 sets of actual bars at the bottom. Hold on, I think I went the wrong way. Yeah, there we go. Data sets are across the bottom and number of records. So Boulder is on the left, Sierra is on the right. We're next to the right. The GeoPortal at search.criticalzone.org, I have created a lot of CZO display files version 1 and set up harvesting to link there. And this graph has 3 separate sets of bars at the bottom for what criticalzone.org, search.criticalzone.org reports for the CZOs that have data there. This reports data sets is the first set of bars, display files, and open topography catalog entries. In the middle one, we have 189 display files linked. Granted, it may look a little inflated on this graph because of the way I break down our display files by year, but even if I were not to do that, we're still in line with the rest of the network. Oops, that went too far. It's a very sensitive mouse. We also connect through the GeoPortal at search.criticalzone.org. Quasi's hydrological information system gets metadata from there. We have time series data and some aqueous chemistry there. And according to the data services and Hydro Desktop, there are 2 sets of bars on this graph. The number of sites, we have 48 sites and 49 variables. We are the next to the right in each set. The light green. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm not always positive what color that is. As far as actual values, we have over 71 million values on Quasi-HIS right now. That's just how, because I was excluding CZOs that didn't have anything. So it changed the colors only. But yeah, we are this vertical bar here. We also have data accessible from EarthChem, 30 DOIs visible there, including various aqueous chemistry data sets and tree survey, including updates. Also, one I neglected to list on this slide, we have Shale Transact meteorological data that has DOIs there as well. As for the local database that I am using, we have an installation of Microsoft SQL Server 2008 that is co-administered by me and people with the university's IT services group. At the present time, it's a relatively flat database just because I wanted to keep it that way in order to maintain flexibility for whatever future changes are ahead. And I don't like to undo a lot of structured database tables while certain things are in flux. You can get to data from web pages. This is a screenshot of part of a web page looking for soil moisture at one particular supersite in Shale Hills, which presents the user with information on the site from metadata and links to an actual download link there for actually getting the data. We have an instrument map that shows, it essentially reads KML files, which are Google Maps layers that I've generated from ArcGIS from our Geo database, which is a database that is also downloadable from our website. I've had a couple of requests to make the actual source KML files for the instrument downloadable as well, and I see no problem with that. I just haven't made my priorities yet. And this is a list of the current data sets we have, at least in terms of type of measurement. We already have data from our Garner Run sandstone forested site. We have a lot of Shale Hills data. Actually, this watershed reanalysis here goes back earlier than 1990. I think it goes back to 1979. More Shale Hills data, and even some data from the Shavers Creek Watershed from the various monitoring sites. Additional activities that I'm currently working on, I'm looking into developing a geotagged metadata database for photos because our new geomorphologist has a lot of geotagged photos from the new field site and would like me to get them online. I do some processing assistance. I'm working with one of the new soil graduate students on processing soil moisture via MATLAB, and I work with one of the meteorology grad students to make sure flux power data are processed. And I've also recently just assumed responsibility for all the precipitation instruments and measurements. That is the end of my talk.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions from anyone? Thoughts or questions from our team? All right. I think I would like to kind of go back to introductions, which is at the top of the agenda, so that we can, as we have this conversation, we can be tuned into each other's voices and know who is who. I think that one of the things that we realized in the first couple years of this project is that I would show up at CZO all hands meetings, maybe with one or two of my colleagues from the CZOData project, and so the PIs would get to know me, but not really, and the investigators and others would get to know me, but not necessarily the whole team. And then we'd have these CZOData IMC meetings where the CZO data managers would get to know the whole project team, but there often wasn't a forum for conversations where everyone was at the table. And I think that some of those connections between people and who's doing what, especially between the PIs and the CZOData team, sometimes got lost. So are you trying to share your screen back to me, Dan? That's something that I need to do. I'll take it back. So if there are any questions, I guess we can, that come up later, we can maybe go back to your talk, or I downloaded it so that I could share it also. So I should be sharing my screen. So that's why we've got, so that's why I kind of want to do introductions. So if each of you could, that as I highlight your name on the screen, could just say your name, institution, and your role in sharing and managing data from Shale Hills, that would be super. So I guess we heard from Dan. Do you want to add anything else?
Not really.
All right. So Dan described his role. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I'm with Penn State. I work to archive the data, so I get IGS for all our sample specimens that come back from the field. They're archived once they're no longer actively being investigated, and are available for any of our colleagues that are interested, assuming they contact us. I get DOI for the data set through EarthChem, and I'm eagerly awaiting the opportunity to share CZChem-DB in another format.
Mm-hmm. Super. Lee.
Hi, this is from Vocabularies. I'm supposed to be the CZO PI that is responsible for the data management. Not sure how much I've done that. I guess the interface between your team and our team. Okay.
All right, thanks, Lee. The voices in the back of the room are a little weak. Jennifer's was weak, and Lee even more more difficult to hear. Brandon?
I am Brandon Forsythe, the Watershed specialist here for Shale Hills. I help with a lot of the data collection, sensor installation, and maintaining it, all that kind of fun stuff. Also work with Dan with a little bit of the data management when I have time in the office.
All right. Ho-Jin?
I'm Ho-Jin Kim, postdoc. I study groundwater chemistry, so I collect water sample and do water chemistry analysis and sample data then.
Sue?
Sue Bradley, I'm the PI. I worry about everything.
All right. Neil?
Hello, everyone. I'm the new graduate student to help manage the soil moisture data, and I also collect some infiltrometer data in the Gartner round now. Thank you.
All right. All right. So my name's Anthony Offenkamp. I'm the PI of the CZOData project. I was asked to step in about 3 years ago, and my background is in organic geochemistry. But so my primary role in this project is to basically coordinate the efforts of this team of people who you're going to hear from in a moment. I've also, because of my work in integrating data, I contributed conceptually to the ODM2 information model and to some of its derivatives, such as the ODM2 vocabulary system, at least the vocabularies in that system, and most recently the Yoda File specification. Jeff?
Hi, Jeff Horsborough from Utah State University, Civil and Environmental Engineering, and my role has been sort of varied. I led the group working on the ODM2 information model. Anthony mentioned the vocabulary work that we worked on, the Yoda File syntax. My background goes all the way back to the quasi-HIS, which the original display file format was based on, and a lot of concepts that we've adopted have come from there. So looking forward to moving forward.
Ilya. Ilya, are you online? Maybe he stepped out. Tom.
Hi, I think Ilya might be muted.
Oh, okay. He's not muted. He's not muted here. So he must be muted locally.
Okay. I work with Ilya and Dave Valentine and San Diego Supercomputer Center at UCSD. I've been working creating the display file to ODM1 pipeline, as well as now working on search interface and integrating that with the GeoPortal.
Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Damiano. I work at the Water Research Center under Anthony. I've done some work with ODM2, with some of the vocabularies and the Yoda files, also some of the data management for the
David Valentine.
Hi, I work with Ilya, responsible for the some information models and metadata management and the water one flow and services.
Ilya, are you unmuted yet? All right, Kirsten.
Yeah, I'm Kirsten Lehnert, Director of the Interdisciplinary Earth Data Alliance and also EarthChem that was mentioned earlier, and I've been working with Sue and Jennifer for quite a while on the geochemical data of the critical zone observatories. We also here we operate the system for a sample registration that provides IGSN for the samples collected at CZOs.
Megan.
Megan Carter. A lot of you already know me, but I am your point of contact here at IETA for registering samples and sites with IGSNs and getting DOIs for your geochemical data sets. It's nice to talk to you all.
David Lubinsky.
Hello, everybody. I'm David. I'm a part-time CZO person based at University of Colorado at Boulder. I'm the kind of chief builder of the criticalzone.org website that runs off the CMS. That site was built a few years ago that pulled together disparate, independently housed sites into a more integrated whole. And also I helped develop the data sets and the data portion, which was kind of an addition to the websites that wasn't part of the original plan, but was requested by NSF. So I will just let you know I'll be a little more visible in the coming year as our funding from the national office for the main part of the website, the non-data part, is going to increase quite a bit in the next 6 to 9 months.
Super. Emilio.
Hi, I'm Emilio Mayorga. I'm at the University of Washington in Seattle, and in the CZOData project, my main responsibility is the data visualization portal. My background is in aquatic biogeochemistry, especially in rivers and carbon and nutrients, but I've shifted over time, and most of what I do these days is environmental data management and data systems of various sorts. And I was also part of the ODM2 team.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Ilya.
Oh, yeah, hi, sorry, I had to disconnect my audio and then reconnect. Don't know what the problem was. Ilya Zaslavsky, San Diego Supercomputer Center, UCSD. Dave and Tom pretty much covered what we do. We've been in this project from early stages when we developed the initial what are now one services and the data display data format and maintained the catalog. And we had similar role previously in quasi-HIS, where we developed catalog and web services, which are now managed by the Water Data Center. So our role here is catalog and web services, pretty much, plus help increase the database schemas and behaviors and whatever comes.
Super. All right. So there's our team. So I think of all the CZOs, the Shale Hill CZO probably knows our team the best because of your proximity and your attendance and number of workshops. But I think it's important to realize kind of who's working on what. I wanted to point out, and I have a link here in this welcome portion of this file, that if you look under the national, and people with the data management or server infrastructure tab, you'll have contact information for nearly everyone on our team. I think everyone on our team is listed here. In addition, the new Submit CZOData web pages that we launched about a month ago, where we expanded one page to 10 pages with much more detailed instructions. Each of these pages for specific topics has a list of contact people to just help better communicate to all of you like who's doing what within our team and who is the point of contact for help. We have created, however, a CZOData help Google. I don't know if it's linked here yet. Maybe I don't think David's done it quite yet. But we have a CZOData help email address that you guys can also send questions to. We'll send that out to the whole team, to all of you soon enough. Dan, if you have a chance, it might be helpful while we're talking for you to drop your presentation slides into this folder, this one-on-one consults folder underneath the CZOData IMC Google Drive directory. If you do that, Sarah or myself, we can post that link here, and it might be just helpful for our team it might help people answer questions. I just realized that since you got the very earliest version of our questionnaire, that request wasn't explicitly posted on there. So that may be why we didn't get as many questions or any questions like we usually do. So while Dan's doing that, do we have any questions from our team? Anything else about what Shale Hills is doing? So it seems like no. All right, I'm impressed. I may be one of the first CZOs who hasn't gotten a pile of questions, but as I mentioned earlier, you guys, the Shale Hills CZO is and our teams are relatively well connected over the years for a whole pile of things, and this information is pretty explicit. So I'm going to go down to the next part of the agenda, which is to ask the Shale Hills group whether or not you've had a chance to look over our new Submit CZO data pages. And I presume, in fact, I know that Dan wrote that he has about a month ago. But I'm more interested in the extended team, specifically Sue and Lily and others. Have you had a chance to look at our new Submit CZO data pages?
No.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's actually great to hear. That was Lee who said that in the background?
Jennifer.
Oh, it's Jennifer. All right. I'm going to take a moment to kind of quickly go over these pages. So when we were first getting started on this project, so we all realized that, but I'll just quickly restate that our team was, after the 2-year delay in funding, in which we didn't actually get funding until March of 2013, our team decided to grab a bunch of opportunities that had developed in that time, mostly due to EarthCube, but also separate funding for ODM2, to take advantage of some of these new cyber infrastructures and also new requests from NSF to build a different kind of system than was proposed. And that was really where we focused almost all of our efforts for a year and a half. Last winter, we realized that communication is where we needed to do the next round of focusing. And we focused on how to access data and provided these different means of accessing the data, which have been described here under the Access CZO data. But what became more clear later into the spring was that despite quite a few cyber seminars where we had given kind of rough guidelines, that we didn't really have very good written guidelines on what we were recommending and expecting from CZOs to share their data. And so therefore, you know, when people would go to access data, they wouldn't find that much because there hadn't been a lot submitted. So in the last month or two, we expanded the Submit CZO data page and basically came up with, I should say, elucidated that there are 7 expectations that we have of all CZOs for sharing data, of course, with our assistants, and assisting you in implementing these 7 approaches is really our highest priority for until the end of March when our current funding runs out. I'm going to go through these really quickly, but we basically have a whole page on every one of these. And then we also have 2 optional approaches that we are also very interested in assisting each of the CZOs on, but it's completely optional up to the individual CZOs. And so I'm just going to go through these really quickly. I think we can go through especially quickly, and because your CZO has actually done a really exemplary job of sharing data, and that's probably why another reason why you didn't get a lot of questions. As Dan pointed out, you have larger quantities of data than any other CZO by really any measure, whether it's individual data points or data values, whether it's composite data sets or data set listings, or individual CZO display files, or even records on quasi-HIS. So our primary recommendation is to list data sets at criticalzone.org. And I think you already know the benefits of sharing your data quickly, getting it out there. The thing about listing a data set at criticalzone.org is that it can take any data file format at all, of any size. And in fact, as you know, the CZOData project is not actually running a data center. We are just providing search capabilities for finding and for certain types of data, integrating data across all the other CZOs in kind of in a uniform way. So any file can be linked, and as soon as a record is created at a data set listing, like the ones you have, I did have that. I see, I was a little confused. So I wanted to look at your listings.
Anthony?
Yeah?
I think we already list our data sets at criticalzone.org, don't we?
Yep, you do. So I was just pointing out, you're right. So if you're suggesting that I move quickly through that section, I was about to wrap that up. So you guys do a great job of doing that. I just wanted to point out that any file can be placed there. The next one I know you all have a lot of interest in is essentially the replacement for the CZO display file version 1, which is the Yoda file. And that format is working well for time series, but basically when we tried to put, and it also on a conceptual level works well for really any kind of data set that can be stored in ODM2, which is a conceptual model. But our Excel template, which guides users through the automated creation of a Yoda file, had some issues that has challenged us, but is definitely resolvable. So we have, I'm sure we'll have some discussion about that in a moment, but that's really our high priority right now that we're working on. Some of the things that were holding us back was some changes to vocabularies that we need to make for Yoda files, for specimens. So I'm going to move on to vocabularies. One of the things to point out is that a Yoda file, like a CZO display file, like a CZChemDB Excel file, are really the three primary file types that if you point to those file types in a CZO data set listing, like is described here, that additional integrative features get enabled by loading up those files. Basically, we can read those three files, the CZO display file and the CZChemDB Excel file, not the database, can be loaded up as a data set, and we will, as described previously, as we've done with the display files, we load them up into quasi-HIS, and with the CZChemDB Excel files, we have we've built basically a mapping so that those can get loaded up into the EarthChem DB that is being developed as kind of the next generation database at IEDA. So the Yoda file is kind of the new approach that's going to kind of harmonize and replace both the CZChemDB Excel template and the time series template and actually could be expanded for a whole variety of other data set types, all the different data set types that can be loaded up into ODM2. One of the things that we have worked really hard on is a controlled vocabulary system. What we do here is that, of course, using vocabularies is an incredibly important part of metadata, and we give detailed instructions on how we expect CZOs to use the vocabularies. And so one of the first things is to accept the appropriate vocabulary system from the recommended systems, and these are listed below. The new ODM2 control vocabulary system is our primary recommendation. There are a couple reasons for it. If you look at ODM2 vocabularies, it's built on its own web server. What we did to build these vocabularies is that we took the best of the best terms and lists from Quasi, from AIDA, from other organizations like NASA when it came to units, and we basically merged them and created as complete a list as possible. So if you look at, for example, specimen type, we have all the specimen types that came from AIDA, plus we have additional ones that might have come from other places. So this is the most complete specimen type vocabulary that's out there. Some of the other vocabularies are not as complete, but this is a complete one. And in fact, AIDA and CSAR and the International Geosample Number Governance Committee recently adopted the ODM2 specimen vocabulary as its primary vocabulary. There are two reasons for this. One of them is that this entire vocabulary is written in RDF and managed under a SCOS. These systems basically allow a single term and a URL to do things like fetch full definitions and all the information about a vocabulary. So it allows basically machine-to-machine exchange of vocabularies. One of the things that we developed into our templates, for example, was a button or a macro that would automatically update the vocabularies. That's actually part of the CZO of the Yoda File template for time series and will be part of it for specimens. The other thing, though, is that it combines the SCOS with the ability to add new terms through a form, a little bit like the Quasi system. So neither the Quasi or the AIDA systems had both of these capabilities. Actually, neither of them had SCOS capabilities, and only the Quasi system had the ability for the community to add terms. So Quasi and AIDA are either developing, AIDA is developing a number of their own systems because they have they're much bigger than just EarthChem, or integrating with this one, and Quasi is very much looking toward this as one of their new vocabularies when they adopt ODM2. However, there are some instances where Quasi 1.1 vocabularies should be used, and we describe very explicitly what those are, and other instances where AIDA EarthChem vocabularies should be used instead of the ODM2 vocabularies. IGSNs, your team knows quite a bit about. I'm going to add some kind of new recommendations that maybe you haven't heard about. The IGSN Governance Committee has recently expanded the scope from just physical specimens that you bring into a laboratory to include all sampling features, which are points of the Earth or places on the Earth, portions of the Earth from which we collect data. So that would include, sites, sections, boreholes, weather stations. So it's not the individual sensors, but actually the Earth that the weather station or the water stream station is actually sampling, the portion. So essentially, international geosample numbers can be used for universally unique site codes. Your team, more than any of the other CZOs, has really adopted IGSNs for specimens, but we'd like to consider having you all assign each of your sampling sites whether it's a soil pit or weather station, eddy covariance tower location, stream gauge, with an IGSN, and then all the specimens or data sets that come from that would be linked to that parent IGSN. One of the huge benefits of IGSNs is this parent-child relationship and the hierarchy. So, for example, this is a recommendation that we're going to have for you all, is that you have an enormous number of IGSNs, and you can see here that this IGSN, just having that number and the rest of the URL immediately pops up a page with a barcode, and all that information can be fetched from that unique number and or that barcode. In a lot of your instances, there's very little information that is provided, and I think it would be really, we'll talk about this in a moment, but I think we want to review all the IGSNs you've created and maybe try to expand the metadata. This one's from Lukio. There's a little bit more information about this one. One of the things I wanted to point out is that there's this related samples part. This is one of the really big parts of IGSNs. You can find its parent, all of its siblings, and then the daughter. So all sample fractions can be basically brought back, can be basically aggregated underneath the ultimate parent. And so that's a recommendation that we have for your CZO. And I think, as you know, if you put the IGSNs in your publications, it creates a record between publications and specimens, and publishers like Elsevier are very interested in using those services so that you can do search by IGSN and find all the publications that produce data on a sampling site, for example. I think you have all done this, but basically geospatial data is no different than any other kind of data, so you can share shape files via dataset listings. LiDAR, you know about our relationship with Open Topography, and then so I'm not going to talk a lot about that. And then lastly, there's a data DOI page that describes the approach to using DOIs. You're also one of the CZOs who have obtained the largest number of DOIs. The recommendation is that you'd create a data set listing immediately, post whatever file you have available at that time, Excel spreadsheet, CSV file, and then slowly work to maybe upgrade that to the Yoda file once it's available. If you load up a CZChemDB Excel template, that could be updated later. And then eventually, once those files, maybe they're private, once those files are basically ready for archiving, a DOI is obtained for that file. Here's the part that we urge you all to do, is that once you have a DOI for a set of data files or a data set, the CZO dataset listing should point toward the record at the data repository. That creates that persistent connection for the long-term record. It shouldn't point at your specific data file. So I'm not really sure. I think this one has DOIs. No, those are private. So when I was browsing around in here, we found some data sets with DOIs, like these ones. That's been up. So that actually, maybe Dan did that or Jennifer. So all of those have been, are now pointing directly to AIDA instead of to your own servers. So that's great.
I think I've done some, but I think I still have a few left to do. It's not a difficult thing. Perfect.
All right. Where are we? So optional approaches. Dan said something about managing data locally in a very simple flat database. One of the things that we support is the use of ODM2 database instances for local data management. There's a there's a huge and expanding software ecosystem that's being built around ODM2. Actually, probably there's a link here. ODM2 is a conceptual information model that we developed to guide all of our ideas about how we would share and integrate data. It's a conceptual model that's incredibly important. The vocabulary system had to be developed after ODM2 was developed. The Yoda file specification had to be developed after ODM2 was developed. But none of those things requires a local CZO to use ODM2. ODM2 is under the hood in the new EarthChemDB. It's there are services being built under the hood at Quasi HydroShare and eventually at the Quasi Water Data Center. The CZO Central Data Catalog is the new version is going to be built around ODM2. So there's a lot going on with ODM2, but you can participate without using ODM2. If you are interested in using ODM2, then there is, as we said, a whole family of software that's being developed, and it's really getting quite mature. So if you go to, actually, I think it's just odm2.org, right? ODM. Well, the link was in that thing. There's the repository for creating your own ODM2 database in any relational database management system, including Microsoft SQL Server. And then we've been working really hard on building a Python API that then is the foundation for a whole bunch of other bits of software, including ODM2 tools for Python, which is a way to manage time series data, streaming data loader. The Yoda file is built right on top of all of these, so we're building actually Yoda tools, which will allow automated generation of Yoda files right out of ODM2 databases, automated reading of Yoda files straight into ODM2 databases, et cetera. So there is an enormous amount of work here, and the number of people who are working on ODM2 is large. It's much bigger than our own team. There are 17 contributors to this project. So, streaming data is the last thing that we are happy to help with. I think you're already well on your way to creating streaming data services. So I don't know if there's anything else I need to add about that, but that's something that we can provide support for. But I think your team already has some really close connections with John Pollack and the group at Quasi for that. So I don't think we really need to help you on that unless you want help.
Yeah. Once we get our new streaming data for the new discharge data stream set up, Brandon and I are going to have to look into it again to see about how quickly we can also stream that on to Quasi as immediate as possible. That would be the end goal there.
Yeah. So one of the things about this is that this, this topic is about streaming data, right? So all the CZOs can get data to Quasi using the CZO display file or the Yoda file time series. But for live data, that's a different issue, right? It uses Water OneFlow web services, and there are lots of ways to do it. It doesn't sound like you have a Quasi Hydro server running locally, no. Right? So I don't know how. So do you have live data right now?
The only thing we have that links to our Penn State hosted web pages, and I think also to the CMS criticalzone.org pages, is some daily precip and four-way radiation data. So we don't have the discharge online again yet.
I see. Well, we could help with that. There are ways that don't require the use of a Hydra server. So, the Quasi recommended approach is to use a Hydra server, but I guess they're aware that there are other ones, but they talk about them here. But but our team has played around with quite a bunch of other tools. For example, first of all, we're developing things around ODM2. So if there's any interest in that, there will be a streaming data system built around ODM2, and then so there are other services out there that we can connect you with that don't use ODM2, that use neither ODM2 or a full-blown quasi-Hydra server. So there are definitely options if that's of interest to you. Streaming live data, especially for things like discharge, is really valuable if you're storm chasing or trying to do, event-driven sampling. It's super useful to know exactly what's happening where in your watershed, so you can send out your teams to fill up water bottles or whatever. So that's a survey of what we offer. Do any of you have any questions about any of that? Basically, this is where we're open to discussion.
It doesn't look like anybody else in the room with me does, but my biggest question comes under item 2 there, which you probably looked at a while back when I originally filled this out. My main issue, and I will admit, until I ran the metrics that you saw in my presentation, I really thought our CZO was lagging behind in terms of how much data we had available. But because one of the reasons was I had to stop sharing some of the data via display files with the geoportal, because a lot of the geochemical data we didn't have the vocabulary for.
Right.
So certain chemical species were missing, and maintenance of the old vocabulary, of course, fell by the wayside for obvious reasons. Not a complaint, just understanding that that's the status.
Yeah, can I pause you for a second and just make sure that we're all on the same page here? So there was a time where the CZO vocabulary was separate from the quasi-vocabularies. It was Mark Williams' idea, and it meant that there were 2 vocabularies to maintain, and they were out of sync, and it was a pain. But it's been at least 9 months now that those 2 were brought back together, re-merged, and now have been under the management of the Quasi-Water Data Center in their new infrastructure. The old quasi-vocabulary was actually still maintained by Jeff at Utah State. So Jeff's team was actually managing both the CZO vocabularies and the quasi-vocabularies. And there was a little glitch, if you remember, where somehow emails weren't being forwarded because there was a staff member who left Utah State. And when that happened, a bunch of email requests and user requests for the CZO system were basically just disappearing into the void. All that is now in Quasi's hands, and the validation of a CZO display file happens versus the Quasi vocabularies. So anything that matches the Quasi vocabularies that are being managed by John Pollock et al. Will work with a CZO display file.
So the new vocabularies are now accessible if I create a display file.
All right.
Although of course, the obvious follow-up question to that is, do I switch now to start creating Yoda files instead of the version 1 display file? Is that finalized and working, at least for time series?
I think you should just go ahead and keep on using the CZO display files if you already have the infrastructure to do it. For simple time series, they're fine. The old CZO display files are fine. I don't know, Jeff can speak to where we are with the Yoda time series file. The software basically works great. I'm going to let Jeff speak a lot more about that. But what we haven't done is actually we're lagging in the documentation for the time series file.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to add, Anthony, that the Excel template is in pretty good shape. We're going through a round of testing right now. So what a user can do is basically download a blank Excel template, paste some metadata in there, paste the data values in there, hit a button that generates the Yoda file. And that's all working pretty well, and like I said, we're just doing the sort of final rounds of testing on the time series template. But if you want to generate the Yoda files, like you want to write Python code to do that or something like that, it's totally valid to do that, but we don't have the level of documentation that you would probably need at this point to actually write the code. Now, you could sort of reverse engineer it from the Yoda file that's generated by our Excel template, but it would be better if you just had a specification to work off of, and we're working on that.
But if I come in tomorrow and want to make a CZO display file version 1 of some data that I hadn't yet bothered to sync because of a limited vocabulary, I should more than likely no longer find that vocabulary limitation in place.
Yeah, Tom, do you want to speak to that? It's been a while now since the CZO vocabulary disappeared. How many instances of display files have gone through the parser since then?
I'll have to look.
So is it generally working?
As far as I know, yeah. It's been a while since I was getting some notifications for a while. It has been a while since I've looked at it. Because most people are kind of like put on pause for the display file 1. But here's the thing. I think what would happen is the ODM, it checks for the vocabulary, and I believe if it might still cause a problem if the vocabulary isn't in the ODM that we have, but we can work around it. I mean, still. I mean, there's ways. So if you do run into that issue, we can, I mean, if I'm aware of it, we can manually upgrade the vocabulary terms that are in your current ODM just to make it work.
So Tom, are you're pointing at the quasi vocabularies now that Water Data Center is managing, right? When you validate?
Yes.
Yeah. So if, and I think Dan in particular has been submitting tons of new terms to quasi. They did that for the Shale network where they're doing all this water geochemistry. So all those terms, mostly vocabulary terms, should be, if you're pointing at quasi's instance for the validation, then all of that should go smoothly. Whereas, a year ago, it wasn't, because there were two different lists.
Okay.
Can I chime in? This is Emilio.
Yeah.
So going back to Dan's question about display file version 1 versus switching to Yoda, I think there are additional consequences that, or things that will happen or not happen if you go one route or the other in the near term while we're in this transition. The vocabulary and the ability to ingest has already been mentioned, but at least with display files, because the system is in place, the display files version 1, I believe they would still be ingested into the CZO, what used to be called CZO Central, the database that's held at San Diego, which means that they would be added automatically to the Water OneFlow, the Class GHIS Water OneFlow endpoint. And that means that as has been happening for the last several years, especially for Shale Hills, which I'm glad you showed that, Dan, that Shale Hills really does have a lot more data than everyone else. It would be available and visible on things like Hydro Desktop or the new Quasi Hydro Client. For the ODM2, while we're developing all the pieces that will enable, and we're making good progress in developing the replacement for that entire workflow, it's not fully in place, and not all the pieces are in place yet. So if you started creating Yoda files or time series tomorrow, the parser that Jeff mentioned, I believe works, or Jeff knows better about this, and could ingest a note into an ODM2 database. But I don't believe we have a mechanism yet to store it like at San Diego, the way we're doing with display file 1. And again, while there's been great progress, the mechanism isn't in place yet to set up a Water OneFlow endpoint to that new ODM2 database that ingests the data from a Yoda file. That progress could happen fairly quickly, but we're not there yet. So just be aware of that as we, and this is something that we'll probably, as we hear from all the CZOs, we'll probably want to, the CZO data team, reconvene and brainstorm what kind of practical advice to give for the next month or two while that transition happens.
So,
thank you for piping that in, Emilio.
So I guess I could back up to generalize a little bit more based on what you guys online know now about my process and my data. Any recommendations for changing my workflow as it is, as of right now?
So since you already have experience creating both, sending data straight to the Quasi Water Data Center.
Actually, I don't. Well,
oh, you don't? Aren't you?
Yeah, I don't do the Shale network stuff. Jennifer does that one.
Oh.
In the group.
All right.
I would say that if you have an automated process that exports display files version 1, in other words, it's not taking a lot of your time, keep doing it for now. But again,
most of the display file version 1 files I made were all brute force. Because when I started doing it, I knew something else was coming.
Okay.
Before we knew exactly what it was. So I decided not to automate a process that basically was planned out.
Wow.
So my version 1 display files were all brute force created. It's not that difficult.
No, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
So
well, during that lull, I'll give my last personal opinion, I guess, that even though the ODM2 workflow isn't in place yet, and we don't have a timeline yet for when, again, that end-to-end from Yoda File to Water One Flow endpoint that can be seen in the Quasi Data Center, Water Data Center, Hydro Client, it could happen relatively quickly. We just haven't made specific plans or decisions. But it may be you should consider investing your time in ODM2 in Yoda files, since that will be the long-term path that will reap benefits from in the long term. Again, if you had display files version 1 being generated easily or automatically, I would say keep doing it because you provide access to the data. But if you have to invest a lot of time on that, I would probably say just that time is better invested on setting up the processes for Yoda files.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my thoughts were going.
Say that again?
That was kind of where my thoughts were headed.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you just want to get the data out there and get credit for it, you just create data set listing pages and throw CSV files on it. And then eventually you'd put the Yoda file there and simultaneously archive the Yoda file and get a DOI. Oh, actually that's one thing I jumped over because you guys have gotten so many DOIs. I didn't really describe this part of the DOI page points out that, IEDA EarthChem isn't the only place to get DOIs. It was the best place several years ago, but we also have this recommended list of data centers or repositories, and IEDA EarthChem library is really excellent with a specialty in anything with the solid earth, mineralogy, or even some geophysics and things. We're tightly integrated with it, and they will be building ODM2 based services such as Yoda file ingestion. Quasi HydroShare, which is really new, is now essentially offering some of the same services as the EarthChem library, but built mostly around hydrological data sets, right? So their specialty is in water data, whether it's hydrology, climate, or water chemistry. And if you can put up any file in the HydroShare library, get a DOI, and it will operate in much the same way the EarthChem library does, but with a specialty in water-related data. They are also committed to implementing services around Yoda files, but they also have services around geospatial files, and Jeff can speak more to it. The quasi-water data center, as you know, is completely a time series oriented service, and they're only beginning to experiment with providing DOIs and long-term archiving of data. That's not something that they had ever done previously. And when they got their funding and cooperative agreement for a water data center, they spent the first 2 years or however it's been just converting all the software and getting it to function on the cloud. It took them 2 whole years to do that. They're just beginning to think kind of what's next. And one of those things is that they are issuing DOIs to web service endpoints. And you must know about it, or some of you know about it, maybe Jennifer knows about it, because one of the very first experimental ones was for the Shale network. But that's only for time series. And then biological data, there's the knowledge network for biocomplexity, and the LTER network information system is now opening its doors to CZOs for biological data, such as tree data and other things. We've begun conversations with these people. Don't have super clear recommendations, but they can also handle any data file you give them and have this web-based form that you fill out metadata for. And that web-based form can be cut and pasted from, all of these web-based forms, like the one you fill out to create this page, is very similar to web-based forms for the other systems. So a lot of cutting and pasting can happen. So before, I don't think we were so clear about recommended data repositories and how to choose between them, but now we are. So back to Emilio's recommendation, if you're kind of waiting for what's next, I think our entire team would strongly urge you to think about taking your local database and trying to use ODM2. So if you go to the ODM2 repository, so this is the ODM2 organization, there are basically SQL scripts for starting a blank ODM2 database right there for your database management system. And there's quite a bit of documentation through this link to get you started. And we're all very keen on having as many people adopt ODM2 as possible. ODM2 is not going away. IEDA EarthChem database is built on ODM2. Quasi-HydroShare and Quasi-Water Data Center are committed to ODM2.
So with that and whatever that already have a model set up, what is the major advantage of using ODM2? Is that the time, or what do you see as an advantage?
That was a little hard to hear. Dan, can you repeat the question?
Lee was asking what the major advantage for me converting my local database to ODM2 structure would be.
For you, Dan? The advantage to you, Dan, or the advantage to Lee?
Well, to me and our CZO.
Ah, who wants to field that question? Jeff, you want to start?
I'll take a hack at it because I think there's a few and there's different perspectives here too. So number one is that there's sort of an ecosystem of software that's evolving around ODM2. So if you were to adopt ODM2, then there may be some software tools that could potentially help you out in your workflows for the data that you're managing. Now, that may not be a really good motivator for you because you may say, well, I don't really want to use any of that software, and that's okay. Another motivation is that it becomes easier for you to integrate all of the necessary vocabularies with your data. So if you're already using the semantics that you need within your data store, then you don't have to do any conversions or mappings when you're converting Yoda files or whatever. It's just your data are already stored in that format, and they're already using the right vocabularies. Another thing is that as we're, I mean, and again, it comes back to software. As we're developing web service interfaces for ODM2, then the actual live data streaming and publication of live data will become easier because we're developing the web service interfaces on top of ODM2 that would actually be available for you. And the nice thing that we've worked really hard with the ODM2 project that's different than a lot of the quasi-HIS software is that we're trying to make things cross-platform. And I'm not sure exactly what your architecture is in terms of platforms, but quasi-HIS was really Microsoft-based, and we're trying to do things so that anybody could run, you know, Linux or Windows servers however they want. So that's an advantage. Everybody else feel free to chime in, because I'm probably missing things.
I think that's some of the major things. You know, this software ecosystem includes things like ODM tools Python, which is this, you know, graphical user interface where you can do time series data management like drift correction and offset corrections and, you know, and other things, including visualization, and it fully, you know, integrates with an ODM2 database and will write the corrections and basically maintains provenance and all sorts of other great features. You know, if you want to stream data to Quasi Water Data Center, live data via an ODM2, you can use software like the streaming data loader, which receives the data from your sensor network, and then the ODM2 Water One Flow web service library will then basically feed it to Quasi in the format using the XML that Quasi is expecting. So that, you know, there's quite a bit there regarding time series stuff that you can get with a Quasi Hydro server, but I guess I'll add this, is that with ODM2, you get all what you get with a Quasi Hydro server, plus you can load CZ-ChemDB type data sets into the exact same database. So you'll be able to locally run a query that might say, give me all the calcium data from this watershed, and you'll be able to get back bedrock calcium, soil calcium, extractable calcium, non-extractable calcium, or whatever. You'll be able to get out the calcium in the stream water that's dissolved, the calcium in the stream water that's attached to particles. You'll be able to get out the calcium from the tree leaves, digestion, or whatever. Whoever's measured calcium, it can all go in one database, and you can find it. There's one variable for calcium. It doesn't matter what media it was measured on. And the whole specimen hierarchy that IGSNs and CSAR provides is maintained within an ODM2 instance. It handles specimens beautifully. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, some of CSAR's infrastructure has been rebuilt using ODM2. I know that EarthChemDB Consolidated there is built on ODM2 databases, and it was EarthChemDB version 2 is basically an ODM2 instance, and I'm pretty sure the new version of CSAR is too. Looks like Kirsten has left the call. I don't know if Megan knows the answer to that. So compatibility with IGSN and CSAR is another one.
And can you say a few words too, Anthony, about cross-CZO, you know, the longer-term future with being able to do granular, you know, inter-comparisons?
Yeah, so a number of other CZOs are very interested in ODM2. Lukio CZO has already implemented ODM2. There is interest, although I'm not sure if anyone elsewhere has implemented it, but there's interest at IML, there's interest at Reynolds Creek, there's interest at EEL. Anybody else know of anyone else who's planning on installing it? Yeah, I think that's the list.
It sounded like Catalina Jimenez was, Mateo was had looked into it and was just waiting to get more specific instructions on what direction to follow, but it sounded like he had done his homework and was ready to jump on it.
That's right.
So I will be upfront about my hesitation in adopting it locally. I mean, I've seen a lot of what's been developed for ODM2. I'm fine with it. It looks like a really good thing for the larger repositories. But my position here as data manager with CZO is kind of like part of my second career. My previous career in the private sector, I ran a support department, and we had to deal with creating databases a lot. So I have a lot of database design experience from years ago, and there always seems to be an issue with, number one, specifications are not always complete up front, and there tends to be a lot of Band-Aids have to be put in that tend to feature creep and cripple the original intent of the design. There's a lot of upfront overhead with regard to converting existing data into that format, and due to a lot of other factors, what happens if something happens fairly soon down the road and we see ODM3 is coming? Now, this is not to insult or put down anybody that's done all this development in ODM2 or for the tools, but that's my prejudice of where it's coming from.
Anybody want to respond to that?
Well, I think it's a valid concern. But, you know, every time I update software on my machine, it's usually painful in some way, shape, or form, but I do it and I move forward. So it's really a decision that you have to make. We're not here to make your job more difficult. In fact, using ODM2 is not one of the required things, definitely in any way. There are some potential benefits there, and as you've laid out, there are definitely there's some energy that you would definitely have to put in up front to get moving in that direction. I will say that how much
data we have, how much of an upfront burden is that to convert now to ODM2?
And there's also decisions to be made, like, do we convert it all to ODM2, or do we convert new data to ODM2? And there's various directions that you could go. But one might ask another question that, I don't know, like 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road, if you're still on the same data system that you're on now, are you going to be okay? And maybe the answer is, yeah, we're going to be fine. We're handling everything that we need. We're producing, you know, Yoda files because that's how we need to be interoperable with the other CZOs, and we found a way to make that work. You know, if all of those answers can be yes, then there's no reason for you to convert. But if you need some of those tools, and if you want to move in a different direction and you see some potential deficiencies in the system that you have now, you might want to consider moving in a different direction.
That's a great answer, Jeff. I'm going to add one thing. We have scripts that translate any previous ODM2 database into an ODM2, and they work pretty well. They've been tested. Jeff has converted all of his relatively large ODM 1.1 data systems into ODM2, and so that kind of forward and backwards that forward compatibility will be automated by this team if things move forward, and probably any future team. So when ODM3 comes out, it should be pretty painless, or at least relatively straightforward to upgrade to ODM3, just like it's relatively straightforward to upgrade from ODM1 to ODM2.
So Anthony, you're saying it sounds like one of the advantages search capability ODM2, is that right? Like, for example, if I want computational magnesium versus discharge over all the CZO size that is with ODM2, I think something like that.
That'd be one benefit. Jeff, maybe you could describe how Tony Castronova uses ODM2.
Yeah, so Tony is, he's a research professor that came out of John Goodall's group at the University of South Carolina, and he is, his background is in coupled modeling and integrated modeling using formal model coupling technology like OpenMI and some of the other technologies that are out there. But what he has done is he's developed an extension for ODM2 for storing model simulation results, and he's actually using it as sort of a local data store where one model component can run and generate its outputs and store them to a local ODM2 database, and then the next model component can pick them up from that local database as a data source and move on with the rest of their simulations. So he's actually created a pretty simple extension to ODM2 for providing the metadata for each model simulation that is associated with each of the components so that they can talk back and forth.
So the ODM2 software system is built in Python, which is an increasingly popular scientific software language. And so the intent is that that ODM2 is a system that could be really expandable and used for all sorts of creative things. And I suggested to Jeff to mention Tony because Lee is a geochemical modeler and does modeling. So that could be another use for you if it's of interest. We're not really here to sell ODM2 to you that much, but the question was asked, so I guess we answered it. You know, what would be the benefits? So as Jeff said in his first answer, it's really up to you, and depending on where you want to go.
I would add.
Go ahead, Emilio.
I would add that when we were planning this one-on-one consults, our original and remaining plan was to have this individual conversations with each CZO and staff, but also after they're all done, sort of take stock of what common concerns and common interests were and try to follow up in the future with really focused calls that on individual topics. So for example, one might be how to create Yoda files. But one could easily be, we haven't discussed this lately because we're too busy setting up the one-on-one and carrying out the one-on-one consults, but one could easily be on the advantage, pros and cons, and work involved in moving to an ODM2 database and ecosystem locally. And obviously, each CZO will make their own decisions, but maybe a conversation like that in the future that involves data managers across the CZOs can give you and others a more informed and balanced opinion about how others are thinking about this. And it'll give us an opportunity to provide a common answers rather than individual ones that might vary from call to call.
Yeah.
So, Anthony, can I ask a question?
Please.
Well, this is the only question that I've ever asked you, which is, what's this, and maybe it's already been asked, but I didn't understand it when it was asked, what's the status of being able to handle geochemical soil data?
Yeah, so the status is that if you load up your CZChem-DB template as a file, or not really load it up, but point to it as a file using a CZO data set listing, like the pages we were just looking at, like this one here. If you have these files be CZChem-DB template, we have essentially more than a year ago committed to developing means to automatically convert that into the next big thing, you know, a Yoda file or ODM ingest it in ODM2. So Kirsten and the team at AIDA has created, basically mapped out those Excel files into their EarthChemDB. And so I'm not really sure what the status is of the scripts of ingesting it into the EarthChemDB, but you could put it in the EarthChem library, and those files can be used to move forward. The Yoda file specification and the ODM2 instance we're still working on. Those Excel templates, we had something that was functional at some level, but super buggy and was causing Excel to crash, especially on Mac computers. But it had issues, and a lot of it had to do with what we discovered over the summer, that a bunch of the issues had to do with the vocabularies and some of the mapping, and so some of what we were trying to do is actually have the Excel file do all the hard work of converting the information that someone types into Excel sheets, like you do in your template, to spit out a Yoda file. So we were having Visual Basic macros try to do that, and Excel just wasn't really robust enough to handle that. So what we've done since then is, actually we took a really different tact. So probably since I last talked to you, instead of trying to improve on the Excel template, we realized actually the Excel template itself should be the file. It could produce, we think that we can have it produce a Yoda file that's valid, but the validation stuff that we had built into the Excel template, we're moving into the world of Python. So we actually started developing these Yoda tools, which is a whole set of a library that basically, if you put up one of these things, the Yoda tools will read it and validate it and make sure that it's compliant and ingest it into an ODM2 database. So this is basically a bunch of Python code that will probably work in a web server, so that you'll load up your template and it will automatically get ingested, and you'll get a nice big green check mark or something on a web page that will say, your Yoda file was validated and ingested into the CZ, into the CZ portal at EarthChemDB or something like that. That's our future plan. So a lot of our work since we last talked was into things like Yoda tools and the vocabularies. Jeff's team has been working on the time series stuff, and
the thing is, the answer, what we should do with our geochemical soil data is put it into the Excel template that was developed for CZChemDB and put it on our Shale Hills website. Is that what the answer is?
That's the short answer, yep.
Okay, all right, that's great.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
And that's an answer that we've been giving, but I guess with a long-winded appendix for about a year, and I'm realizing that we still haven't actually clearly stated that on these web pages. So that's what I'm just realizing that I need to update this web page right here to basically say, while you're waiting for this, just load up your CZChemDB files.
Sue has to take off, Anthony. She's got to drive. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. So we still have another 8 minutes scheduled or so. Are there any other thoughts, Dan, about what you would like, or any of you in that room, about what we could help you with?
I think the biggest cloud in my mind with regard to understanding the stuff from your end was just the status of what I should be doing. New data with regard to the national repositories, because I get it right now, and that's been cleared up. I can keep making version 1 display files, I can keep syncing them with the existing ingest for the geo portal, and it should be linked to the new quality vocabulary.
Yeah.
That was my biggest cloudy area coming in here, is where are we right now? And that's something I want to do right now.
Tom, how does the current system work for CZO display file version 1? If Dan creates a CZO data set that then gets, read in as such by the geoportal, does that automatically trigger an ingest, or I know there was an older system that kind of required that the file get listed in a certain place.
Right, we're not he would also need to go to the central.criticalzone.org and to trigger the ingest that way.
So the same way I have been doing it.
Correct, yeah. We talked about one point in time, because right now, everything that's in the CMS gets pushed over towards the geoportal, but it doesn't go the other way.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I put something new on the CMS, am I doing double duty if I then go make display files?
Well, yeah, in essence. But here's the thing: if you put the display file into the central, it will automatically get registered as a display file on its own, so it'll be its own unique item. And also, it'll then be integrated into the ODM, which then is served via web services and viewable in the visualization. So that's really what you get about uploading the display file.
Okay.
Right, the integrated data set part of here's all our data being served out of a web service. What's in the CMS is a great catalog of the inventory of your data sets, and then the display in the search interface.
Okay, so I don't need to change that part of my work.
No.
Tom, I think we need to, this conversation makes me realize that since things aren't fully functioning for the Yoda files, we need to add underneath the Yoda file instructions some links or pages that describe how, in the interim, to basically create a data set listing with a CZO display file, version 1, how to basically register the CZO display file version 1 so it goes through that process you just described, and then also to use the CZChemDB Excel file, to post the CZChemDB template while we're waiting for the Yoda file specimen profile to be developed. So do you have any written instructions that you could send me and we could put in here?
I can come up with them, yeah. I don't have anything already, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we had some instructions ages ago when we were helping the CZOs do this.
Yeah, I'll be digging through some old stuff, I'm sure. But it's been a while. We've been moving forward with the new systems and everything, so yeah, we haven't looked at what we have been working with for a while. All
right. Yeah, why don't we should work on that, and I'll write up something about CZChemDB files, and if you could write up something about the CZO display files, then that would be great. Anything else, Dan?
Not from me.
Or anybody, Jennifer? So yeah, go ahead.
No, I think everyone here in the room is good. We understand where we are and where we need to go, and where you guys are and where you're going. And eventually we're all going to be in the same place.
Excellent. So in the next couple minutes then I'll just say where we're headed in the near term in terms of what the next steps are in terms of communication with all of you. We are in the process, as Emilio mentioned, of thinking about WebEx conversations that are topic specific, that really are rolling up sleeves for data managers to ask questions about, example, adopting ODM2 for local data management. So we can have a whole conversation just about that, or whatever it might be. So we're going to have a series of those moving forward, and we're open to topics where you want more help. It sounds like, it sounds like we're going to have one about a local ODM2 adoption, but there'll be others for sure. We're also interested in having some workshops to finalize some of the things that we're working on. And I know that you guys have been great participants in that. We'll probably are going to have another Yoda File workshop this winter, actually. We made a ton of progress. Last time we kind of showed up with some ideas in a couple of our heads and made progress of really just getting started with Yoda Files. What we hope to have the winter workshop be is really kind of rolling up sleeves and making sure it works, and kind of that kind of thing, and maybe expanding a little bit on additional profiles beyond time series and the general specimen profile. So we'll be in touch with you about that. We're also interested in hearing what you think we all need in the future, like where the CZO data team needs to go. We are going to be having conversations with NSF in the next couple of months to try to figure out where the future of the CZO data project is, and we really want to have input from each of the CZOs, from all the CZOs collectively, but also as individuals, about what you believe your future needs are. So I don't know if you have anything off the top of your head along those lines. This was left blank, this future needs part of our questionnaire.
Yeah, I kind of stared at that one for a while. I really wasn't sure at this point.
We have some ideas.
What?
We have some ideas of what might be a direction to pursue, but has everybody had their one-on-one consult yet?
You are the 6th CZO. There are 2 scheduled tomorrow, and EO hasn't yet contacted us about, or hasn't yet returned any of our calls or emails about scheduling. I guess Bill Dietrich doesn't see the purpose, so he's kind of choosing not to respond. It's not that he doesn't know about us.
Well, I think in all reality, as far as the data project goes and us as a network, from my experience over the last 7 years, and I've seen where it started and where it is now, I think that as a network, we really need to be able to provide people that do not go in the field in all the different CZOs, to be able to take the data from all the other CZOs and implement it into whatever tools they use to ask their critical zone questions. And that's really been a challenge, at least here at Penn State, because our teams that don't go in the field don't have easy access to all of this other shared data, even though it's being shared. So if this ODM2 platform that you guys are still creating is going to be that way, we'd like to see that. Because we know that there are other team members of the other CZOs that also would like to have an easier access to this data as a network.
To your data.
And to everyone else who's in the network.
Yeah, I think that the NSF is really pushing in terms of thinking about cross-CZO comparison. And it definitely needs to be data compared from different sites. And I think if ODM2 can have this search capability, that it will be easy to get data from different sites. And we can kind of synthesize very
Yeah, well, that's why we created ODM2. Starting with the concept, with the intent to do something like ODM2 about 3 years ago, and developing a system where people are ingesting data from multiple locations in an easy-to-do way, and integrating data is more than a 2 or 3 year project. So we definitely want to go in that direction. And we're really quite confident, if not excited, that the foundation is really set up for that.
Like a cross-CZO network data search sounds to me like something that the geo portal would be intended for.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, the kind of cross-CZO data searches that Lou Derry wants to do can't be performed with the geo portal.
Anthony, this is Jeff. I got to run to my next meeting, but thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for starting to think about those things. Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up this call. Appreciate everyone being on the call for this long, and continue to think about what's next. There'll be ample opportunities for conversations in the coming months to help us frame the next round of funding for CZO.
Anthony, I didn't get my slides up on the drive space yet because my Mac navigation is a little rusty, and I wanted to make sure we could all see here the questionnaire that you've got shared.
Okay.
So I will try to get those uploaded to the drive space.
All right. No worries. That will be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.